back, everyone, to this week's FastTrack Live. We've got a really fantastic session lined up for you today. We got a lot of great ground to cover, so stick with me. And we will be covering a lot of your submissions from this week. But first, let me go live. I need to activate going live here in Facebook. Recently, the platform has just changed, so we're going to do this again now. So I'm going to run this again from the beginning. We should be having Facebook joining us. We've got a great set of submissions to cover for you today. And I'm really excited because it gives us an opportunity to roll up our sleeves and begin putting into practice some of the most common principles that we apply in our publishing system that helps make publishing smooth and easy, even if you've never published before. So we're going to be dipping into elements of our peer system, our training system for academic writing. We're going to be dipping into our systematic review course, which helps you define a winning topic and take it all the way through to submitting with confidence to a journal like you've done it a million times. And as ever, we've got some of the questions that you've sent this week in our group community chats in our Facebook group. If you haven't joined our Facebook group already, you definitely want to do that and not miss out. Now, before I get into all that, I do need to check the stream because with the recent Facebook updates, they have unfortunately made it more complicated to stream directly to a group. They just seem to want to keep things in-house. It looks like that is working the way it should. But guys, as ever, send me in the comments if there's something that you're not able to see or that you're missing. And I do see some people jumping straight here on the call. I can see we've got Amir Ali joining, which, hey, welcome. Good to have you with us here in the studio. And if you follow through Facebook, the link can take you right here and we can directly communicate and chat there. I can see we got Tal and Akraka, Katija. Great to have you all join. So for this week's quick tip, before we dive in, one of the most important things that you can do to not feel lost and regain a sense of control, clarity, and direction is to make a roadmap. And this mapping exercise is something really that doesn't apply to grad school. It applies to anything you do in your career. If you don't have clarity about your main goals and the steps that you're taking to get there, you're going to feel lost. You're going to go in circles. And I think people encounter this career-wise, but they often encounter it for the first time when doing a PhD, because when you're in a master's or in other courses, it's step by step. You do this, you get this grade. You take these steps, here's how you prepare for an exam. When you're swimming in the sea of a PhD, you're oftentimes plunged out on your own and you have to find your way and develop yourself into being an expert. And nobody's going to do that for you. That's what makes a PhD so fundamentally different. You can't really buy a PhD, not anyone that has any worth or value. Even if you have great mentors, they can't do it for you. This journey is a very personal one. And you wouldn't want to start any journey without a roadmap. So really critical to make a roadmap, defining goals, and taking time to anticipate to get to where you want to go. What are the likely roadblocks you're going to encounter? And do you have a plan in place? Can you anticipate some? Some you can't, that's okay. But do you have a plan for what you're going to do if, say, you're trying to drive to Kansas, but the highway is blocked and you've got to take another route, right? Are you going to have an alternative way? Are you going to have a plan B? What are you going to do to overcome that? Some of these challenges are really quite predictable that PhD students will face. So I really encourage you to do that. If you haven't ever made a roadmap, we've got a guide showing you how, and some actual roadmaps that we can share with you that we share more privately with some of our students. It's really helped them get a lot of clarity on their own goals and unlock their productivity. So with that, okay, we've got a few submissions, and one I've got that I want to turn to first is a research proposal. And so, as I remember, in a winning research proposal, there are a few things that need to be crystal clear, because otherwise your supervisors aren't going to understand it. They're not going to get your big idea. They're not going to understand what you really want to do. So you need to make sure that the gap, kind of what is missing in your field that we need to know about, is really key. You need to have the gap, and you need to have your idea or your innovation or your intervention. You need that idea to come into clear contact with your gap. So those are two elements, the G and I, the gap and the idea of our GIFT method. It's the same method that I've used for writing research proposals. It's helped me win over $10 million in competitive grant funding, and the one that I've passed on to my students. Because before you have those nuts and bolts in place, you're really going to struggle. So we're going to take a look and make sure that the gap and the idea are on point. We might get to the F and T of the GIFT method, which is feasibility and the timeline. But first, we need to check those two things because they're the most common ones that can really be, all right, you can fix a timeline, but it's much harder to fix an idea. So I'm going to zoom in, guys, and hopefully, you'll be able to see this reasonably well. So this is here. The student sent me 3 chapters, but for me to really know what's going on, I can really test them first. So as you're seeing this, I'm going to zoom in again to make this easier to see. We need to find the gap. So as we go through it, look with me and let's see if we can find the gap. And remember, if you don't know what the gap is, it's really, again, all right, the frontier of your field. So the research has been done before it comes to here and stop short here, and here's where we need to get to next. So let's take a look. One thing I can also see here, there's just some stylistic writing things. We could chat about those. If you're going to cite a seminal publication, there's not really much reason you need to cite it as cited in by somebody else. This is a seminal publication. So that said, I do recommend people err on the side of oversighting generally. So I don't see, okay, this is good. So you're saying that this patient safety is very important and that we have high deaths in hospitalized patients. So this is good in an introduction. You want to set the stage for why is this conversation so important. Talking about patient safety incidents. Okay, lots of stuff on patient safety incidents. Now this here is, again, we're running into some challenges here. The first sentence you want to be a topic sentence. This is what the paragraph is about and how that fits into your studies, into your story. And you're just jumping in straight to describing a study, but not really making a core point here. So here, I think what you're trying to do is describe what literature is out there about patient safety a little bit, but really you want to contextualize this to say, you need some first sentence here to say, well, there's been a ton of studies on patient safety, and then get into kind of what's missing very quickly. You need to get to that gap. So now you're just telling us there's more data on patient safety, but you kind of already gave us this. So your structure is kind of winding, zigzagging back and forth. We want your structure to go in a straight line. Okay, it's still not seeing a gap. We need to get to a gap. Okay, now we're going to talk, it looks like you've got developing country studies. So you can see, guys, I'm all the way down here and I don't see a gap. And this is a problem. Already you've lost me. You've lost all your supervisors. What's the gap? So, in fact, we've got a whole first section. We don't have a gap. Now we're getting into maternal mortality. Okay. And it looks like you're repeating kind of the structure that we had from the introduction before. Okay. Right. This looked like it could have been a gap, but it's not a gap. Okay. Yeah, so this is a problem. I'm seeing here the big, I mean, I'm on page 4 here, and I don't know what the gap is. So let me step back. Okay, I mean, I'm intentionally reacting for the first time on some of these. I think what you're wanting to do is look into something to understand the barriers to maternal mortality. So if this is about maternal mortality, you don't need to say, first talk about there's a problem with patient safety, and within patient safety, there's a problem with maternal mortality. And I can see why you've done it, but get straight to the point. What's the big issue? Maybe you need to say maternal mortality is unacceptably high. It's been addressed in high-income countries through a series of interventions that haven't yet reached the global south. And you want to do what? We need the gap and your idea. So let me keep looking and see if it's in here somewhere. Okay, I hope I didn't make you all too dizzy by scrolling too fast. But you can see how right, you want your supervisors to get it. You want anybody to look at it to get why this is so important right away. Now we've got this bit on South Africa. Okay, here we got a problem statement. So patient safety incidents contribute to a significant portion of maternal health complication mortality. Okay. Yes, but this should have been your background already, because now you got a new problem statement here that wasn't there before. It's clearly linked, but you've kind of danced around it a bit. Okay, here's a lack of research. Okay, so here's your gap. There's a lack of research dedicated to examining patient safety incidents in the realm of obstetric health. So I'm not sure you've shown that in your literature review. Your complete background literature review and justifying the gaps, and you just say, hey, we've looked at patient safety in cardiovascular disease, in diabetes, but nobody's looked at it in obstetric health. And for my background knowledge, I'm not sure that's the case. I think the studies have been done on obstetric health to look at, well, why does something go wrong and a mother goes septic and then dies? So you haven't convinced me of this. And so this entire literature review, I don't want to make you feel bad. You almost need to discard much of this. And I sometimes recommend making a graveyard file, discard a lot of this, and start over and make an outline that gets you straight to this gap and then justifies and proves this gap. Because this gap here, it comes out of nowhere, unfortunately. Now, I think you can still draw on some of the stuff that you've done. But this idea, and I think you might have fallen into this, is I'm going to read a bit, and while I'm reading, I'm going to start writing. I'm going to read and start writing, ends up with this kind of zigzag structure that can create a big mess. A mess for you to manage and a mess for your readers. And what sometimes I find with students is then they've written all this stuff and it's like, well, I like that sentence. I like this. And they have a tough time doing this. So what I think you need to do, I think it will also help you to have a title that works as a North Star, is really you need to take all this out right now and move it somewhere else. You really need to move all this out and start by making an outline. You need a title. So I think, let's say title. Let me give you a working title. So how to reduce patient safety incidents in obstetric care. An epidemiological, I can't spell, investigation in rural South Africa. Something like that. And then what do we need to do? We need to get the gap right up here. And I think I actually didn't delete enough. Here we go. So I want to remove everything and start with just your gap. Let's start with the gap. So what do you need to do to get to this gap? Well, in your outline, you need to say, I would go ahead and talk about patient safety incidents, the problem of patient safety incidents. And then I would get into evidence of what is being done about them, working or not. And then you need to say lack of evidence in obstetric health. If this is your argument, and basically this is one paragraph, another paragraph, another paragraph, and that should get you straight there. You can then expand it like you've done with more data and details, but you need that kind of core central structure to make your argument smooth and linear. Now let's see what you're trying to do with your idea to address this, which I think is farther below. So the aim of the study. So now you're looks like you're investigating. I think you want to say the causes. Maybe you could talk about the risk factors. But I like this. I think this is good. I think this works. You need to justify why this hospital. Why is this a good case study? What can this tell us about the rest of the world or the rest of? I'm assuming this is South Africa. We don't know where this is, but you need some justification. That needs to come earlier. And what initiatives are already underway? And that's why we need that context before of, well, what do we know about what initiatives are happening or not working? You actually want to give us a kind of conceptual framework of here's what the WHO or other leading organizations are saying we need to do to prevent these patient safety incidents. That's critical information. It's not there, and it makes it very hard to assess the value add of this study. So thanks again for sharing this with us. I know this can be harsh to drop everything into a graveyard file, but I think if you look at this with fresh eyes, you're going to see more clearly now, having done all this background reading of what you need to do to streamline and make linear this argument. So yeah, thanks again. And I'm going to come back to the comments before I turn to the next one. Ask you guys if you have any questions about the gift method for yourself. And if you are working on a research proposal or going for grants, the first two questions I'm going to ask about: what's the gap? What's the idea? You got to get those two things right. And I often do say, getting those two things right will determine the bulk of your success or failure with your project. Okay, coming back here to the comments. So will this live chat be uploaded afterwards? Somebody asked me. If you want me to, I can drop the live chat here. But it's more if I move the comments through. People, I believe, on YouTube might be able to see everything, but admittedly, I'm less of a technophile with these sorts of things. Amir Ali, Amir says, thanks so much, Professor, for this amazing session. I'm glad this is helpful to you. I hope you guys can start to streamline this into your own work. So we've got some new people joining us as well. By the way, if you are just joining us, hey, Christmas, good to have you join us. Do be sure to join my Facebook group because it has the advantage over YouTube of we can directly chat there. And if this is helping you, do give us a like because that really helps us in the algorithm. As I've learned, right? I never was on social media, often finding it a distraction, but I've realized I can reach more people that way. And by liking our videos, it helps the algorithm to search for other people who might not otherwise benefit. I see Daniel. Daniel, unfortunately, with the new Facebook group update, your comments will go to Facebook, but not the rest of us. So I'm going to copy these in because I think it's nice we have some group experts like Daniel who have been with us for a long time and have learned a lot. And these group experts are also available and happy to chat. I'm just going to copy in what Daniel says here. And he's saying in the comment here, we provide background of the context, describe the problem. With that, we highlight gaps from all these different areas and continue to say, after the context being framed, we can begin to illustrate the research gaps, objectives, and scope of research. Yeah. So, Daniel, it sounds to me like you really internalized the system and you kind of intuitively know that you need to identify the gap, of which there are many types of gaps. We have a dedicated training on identifying and cataloging the various gaps that are available. And that can really help you if you don't have clarity on your gap to just look at a menu of other people's gaps of what they found. And we've also got some tips and tricks on how you can use AI to help you find your gap and get clarity around it, using it as kind of your personal research assistant and support. Mansoor asks if we have these workshops every week. I try to. When I get submissions from you and I see there's enough demand for it, then I like putting on these workshops, especially if there are some potential teachable moments coming out of it. I can see Stefan has just joined us. Stefan, I got an email from you, so I am actually coming to your question later. Glad you popped in the chat now. I will come to that. I want to go through the next submission because we've got one that I think is pretty interesting as well. And this one is actually a systematic review from one of our students, Joanne, who has done a systematic review before. So she's experienced, but I took a quick glance at this one earlier because if you send me a full paper, I do need a second to look at it. And there are a few things that I think we can work on to really take it to the next level. So let me share my screen here. And and you can see, guys, what I'm hoping, if I can get this right, is I want you to understand my thought process. So I'm not saying you have to think like me, but it will give you a framework and more clarity, perhaps for yourself as you address some of these challenges too. I like to have a working title to keep things organized and clear in your own mind, like a North Star, so you know where you're heading, just like I did with the other paper. It's very easy to go down rabbit holes and get lost. So let's take a look at this one and just quickly glance at the abstract. So this systematic review aims to explore the effectiveness of this training framework for pre-service teachers based on pre-COVID, during COVID, and post-COVID periods. Okay, I already have some problems with the question. Why is this innovative? Who are these pre-service teachers? And why is COVID so important here? There's just a lot of necessary contextual information that's missing. And it may be a very specialized niche area in your field, but in general, I want you to pitch for a big international audience when you can. And so you need to open up that conversation so everybody can take part. The other reason is when you ultimately go to reviewers, your reviewers may not know anything about this, and you're just assuming a lot. And if they don't know anything about this, they're going to be just like me. They're just going to be like, why is this important? What's the contribution? It seems narrow niche. I don't think it's right for this journal. And sadly, that happens with a lot of editors and reviewers who make a quick judgment like I just made, and this paper would probably not have been sent for review. This abstract also has some problems. And this is from Joanne. So Joanne, I'm looking at this with a view towards something you want to submit. So I recommend using our method here of abstracts, break this abstract into its component parts, turn the unstructured abstract into a structured one. By the way, if you don't know what that is, guys, a structured abstract often it forces you to have categories like here's the background, here's the method, here's the results conclusion, and method, results, conclusion. And I recommend you break it into, oh dear, I don't know what I just did there. Perils of talking and writing at the same time. Results and conclusion. And that will make sure you have all the necessary content. And what you can see here is the background's not there. That kind of why are we having this conversation now is not in your abstract. You have not convinced me that this is important. Why do I need to read your paper? And method, you said you did a systematic review, but that's it. But method, there is, that funny Giddle, whatever I accidentally wrote, was supposed to be methods. You have no methods in your abstract. There's no method. No method, not a research paper. This is dead on arrival. So that's a problem. And the results are, it's unclear. So this may be, I wonder a bit if you submitted this to a conference, because it's kind of speculating that you might do some research in the future. This seems like you have at the end of your abstract. This looks like it's more the background here, which is kind of like your abstract got flipped on its head, which again, guys, using this kind of structure in some of our systems in place makes it a bit foolproof to get wrong, because it's almost like a checklist. If you've ticked all of these things and then you suture your abstract back together, you're going to have a good abstract with everything it needs to have. It may not yet be outstanding. That's the next step. But at least it's going to be solid. It's going to be intact. And this one just isn't yet. But Joanne, I'm confident that it can be. So let me keep going. I actually want to go to the methods. But remember, in the introduction, we need to get to why are we having this conversation now, and almost symptomatic of what we saw in the abstract. You're just diving straight into this TPAC framework without explaining it to us. And so I want to see also here a gap. Where's the gap? Maybe there's not. Has there been a systematic review about this already? What's been done? What's not been done? I don't understand this differentiation into pre and post COVID. So that's something you've got to check. That doesn't make a lot of sense to me intellectually. Methods, I can see already things that jump out as howlers. I don't recommend searching across all fields. You're going to get a bunch of junk. In your search, why are you not searching for TPAC? If this TPAC thing is so important in education, it should be a term. It should be a model that's commonly used. And I don't see it there. I don't think this pre-service word is very common, and you can see that as well in having to add teacher education training preparation. So get rid of the pre-service teachers if that's going to cause confusion in your abstract and in your title. Why don't you just call it teacher training or teacher preparation? This seems much clearer to me. So yeah, I've got some concerns here about the way you've done this method, both on this grounds and on the all fields grounds here. So I think these are going to limit you. The other thing that I like that you've made this Pico table. This is good. But this outcome is really weakly defined. This is really, really unclear. So that also concerns me. Concerns me quite a bit, actually. So I would really be I'd be quite cautious about that one. This job readiness, pedagogical content knowledge, it just doesn't work. This is not it's not a common outcome in education. Um, so I'm concerned. I have some real concerns. I think this paper has some fundamental flaws to the framing and to the methods that you've got to rectify. If you write to me directly, I'll get you in touch with some resources that can help. But like I said, guys, I think it's really important to get your topic right. I'd say about, again, coming back, like I said a moment ago, with the gap and the idea, about 90% of your success on a paper is going to depend on the topic. And you can kind of see that when people write on COVID. You could write almost anything on COVID at the beginning and it was getting published because it was so hot. And so if you're in a really debated area where there's a lot of conversation going on, they're going to want those voices from intellectuals weighing in with evidence, data, facts. And it's easy to publish. But if you're in a narrow space where people don't know what a TPAC is or the pre-service teachers or job readiness, it's going to be very hard to publish. It's going to be very hard to find a journal that wants to take that. And even if you do get it in, are you having any impact with that paper? Because ultimately, I think you're doing this because you want to improve. You think there's a problem with how teachers are prepared for the job that they're thrown into, and they're not getting the right training. Or maybe they are, and you need to scale up that training more. I don't really know. It's hard to envision what you want to say with this paper. Thanks for sharing it with us. Again, I know I'm being pretty harsh, but I also want to give you my honest, unfiltered perspective of what the strengths and the areas of development are. Better to hear it from me than to feel crushed if you get the same comments from a peer reviewer later on down the road, when it's even harder to make those changes. And believe me, the more you work on a paper, the harder it is to come back and change it. So guys, let me take a few other comments. And I like having these chats about systematic reviews because it creates a platform for other people to ask questions when they see other people are struggling with similar kinds of things. So Mansoor asks, I fine-tuned my searches and I couldn't get it below 1,500 articles. Is that too many papers to screen? Look, I just did a scoping review for WHO, and I ended up going through 2,000. But what I later ended up having to do was drop things into different buckets, and I ended up breaking mine into 3 different papers. So you might find it's not an insurmountable number of papers to screen, but it's highly likely, unless you're looking for a needle in a haystack as you go through these articles and you're accepting very few, you might find that you're ending up with way too many in your study. And there's no correct number, but you can understand the consequences of a different number of final articles. If you have a lot of final articles, you're not going to have space in your paper to really go into detail about those articles. You can't do a more thick qualitative description or synthesis of the articles. You have to move to more quantitative analyses, the larger number of papers you have. The fewer number of papers, you can imagine, if you only have 8, well, you can write about each and every one of those papers and really get face-to-face with them and go into detail about them in your paper because you've got the word length and the space in your paper to do so. So think about those consequences, and I always recommend, as a part of our system, to, as you pilot your search, to take, say, the first 20 or first 50 and see what percentage of those in screening you're accepting. So if I do the first 20 and I realize I'm accepting 10 of them, that means I'm going to end up with 750 articles in my final net. And I already need to think about how to adjust my inclusion-exclusion criteria to get that to something more manageable. And this is another part about engineering your topic. You want to engineer it so it's not too big, not too small, high impact, and not kind of a dead debate area. And these are things that it's really valuable to work with somebody who can help you with that, and you want your supervisors and mentors to play a role in that process. So thanks for asking that. Really, really good question. Let me come and ask. So Stefan, I think this is a good time to take your question. So Stefan had a really nice question. I'm just gonna, Stefan, if you're happy, I'm gonna share what you wrote to me. And Stefan wrote this. I'll have to read it because it won't copy and paste all the way through. So Stefan asks, hey, quick question regarding AI usage during literature review. Since the process of this part of the paper literally involves finding previous studies on a given subject and then paraphrasing them to set the scene for one's own paper. Is it best practice? And I'm actually going to copy this again here because I think this is a comment that a lot of people can relate to and have been wondering about. So yeah, and guys, that's the power of community. Is all right. Things come up that some students facing that you might face in the future and not realize is an issue, or other people have been grappling with this alone and suffering in silence and wanting help, and you've just done them a great service. He continues to say, is it best practice to input this to an AI tool and say, hey, paraphrase the following two sentences for my literature review in such a way that it will not be labeled as plagiarism? And short answer is no, don't do that. If you see our do's and don'ts with ChatGPT, we do not recommend using ChatGPT language and copying and pasting it directly in. What we do recommend is if it sounds like you're doing a conventional literature review, not a systematic one, where you're stripping out information, good. But don't pop that into ChatGPT to paraphrase yourself. Even if English is not your first language, I want you to paraphrase it yourself, make sure you understand it, then throw it into ChatGPT and ask ChatGPT to take a light footprint and edit only for academic clarity instead. That's the way I would go. Always make sure you're citing, and if you do have verbatim phrasings from the paper, put quotes around it. But I'm really glad that you asked that, because if you just paraphrase it, you're going to get a lot of ChatGPT-esque language that will get labeled as plagiarism. Bear in mind, not just plagiarism, but also AI content. A lot of those AI content detectors are pretty crap. I actually have found the problem that happens is the better you're writing, the more likely it is to get flagged as AI. So I've had pieces now that I've written that were 100% written by me and got flagged as having high AI content, which is rather amusing, and my students to accuse me of being a robot, basically, which, you know, it's pretty funny. But I am fierce, but loving at the end of it because I want to see you all do well. So yeah, but there are some elements that when you get into a publishing system, you can start doing them in your sleep that take a lot of the guesswork away, and that element can feel a little bit robotic, and in a good way. Okay, so I hope that answers your question, Stefan, because it's a really, really good one. And yeah, Stefan, I just said that kind of same thing here. Don't use it to paraphrase. Do use it as a personal writing coach. Ask for feedback on your writing. How can you improve it? Ask if your topic sentences are clear, if the outline and structure makes sense. Those are good things. But having it do some of that heavy lifting for you, I don't recommend. And let's go ahead and take Assam's question as well, since I can see that you're live here. And sorry if I'm getting your name wrong. I thought it was Asim in the message, but now here it seems to be Assam. So Asim says, and I'm going to read this out to you, I'm a PhD scholar in media and communication. Presently, I get stagnant and frustrated in making literature review as I've downloaded too many articles and don't know how to proceed. A side note, I've seen this a lot. I saw one older student, a more non-traditional student, when we had our first Zoom call together, her desk was stacked with papers that she had printed out, and they were flying everywhere as we were trying to talk, and she was looking for a paper that could make the point she wanted to make. And it sounds like this is just happening to you digitally. And I see this a lot. And he says, I read the articles, but could not manage to make the most of them as it dragged my attention anywhere else. And this is so common. I mean, you get the articles and you're just overwhelmed with you're lost at sea. It's like, well, this is interesting. Maybe I need to go look at that. Oh, this is interesting too. I need to look at that. So I mean, I recommend a systematic literature review. You could see it in Joanne's paper a moment ago. You're going to set boundaries on your review. Say, it's going to make you focus and say, I want to know this, I don't want to know that. And it sounds like you don't have clarity on, yes, this is interesting, this is not interesting to my topic or my research question. And that is a recipe for this kind of endless reading that doesn't move you forward. So yeah, I think in your case, also because your field is in media and communication, I do recommend a systematic review. I think that's going to help you a lot. Again, these tools are well and good, but you need to understand the nuts and bolts of the basic. And my sense of this challenge you're having with the structure of your literature review is likely, it's my guess, could be wrong, it's suggesting to me that the topic isn't crisply defined to have those clear boundaries in place. So I recommend going and taking a look at our PICO system. You mentioned this, you mentioned here, say, you mentioned your videos of strip method and the peer method, but I'm still struggling to make structure of my lit review. Check out the PICO method. I just want to make sure your topic's on point. I won't be able to get into that now, but it's just a tool to help ensure your topic's well defined, and you can find it in our systematic review playlist. In the first video of the playlist, we're going to go through defining your topic. Just do that as a spot check on it to make sure it's all in point. But my intuition, Asim, is that's what you're struggling with as the kind of underlying problem. I'm going to go check the Facebook stream because, again, like I said, annoyingly, this has been set up in a way that I can't see everything at the same time anymore. Okay, we've got some comments here. Okay, Colleen said we were reviewing her chapter 1 earlier. Thank you for the shock. I will work on it. Okay, Colleen, look, I think you're going to do well. I think you got a great topic. But that attitude of being open to feedback and trying your best to take it on board will really help you. And I think the second pass that you make here, you're going to have so much more clarity in doing it. Abubakar writes, and I don't understand, Abubakar, your question, can you identify gaps in your introduction? Right, okay. I thought you were asking, can I identify gaps in those introductions? But yes, 100%, your introduction needs to identify gaps. I'm just about to post a video on YouTube. I'm sharing a bit of our publishing system formula for the introduction, of which one of that 3-part formula is definitely articulating the gap. So stay tuned for that, and I'll send you a copy of that when it comes out. But yeah, you 100% want to identify the gap because your readers need to know what your value add is of your paper. Linda asks a good question. Is it common to register the systematic review in Prisma or leave that part out? I think you want to say register with Prospero. And guys, there's a problem in the field of something called publication bias, where only the positive results get published and the negative results just get buried in a graveyard of studies we never see. And that skews our picture as scientists. So the way to get around this is to pre-register studies. And that pre-registration process in the health sciences is usually through something called Prospero. It's just a pre-registration system. And if you're doing something related to health, yes, absolutely, you need to register. If not, then probably won't be necessary. But good question. And we have somebody in the group already who has registered here with Prospero. That's awesome. Yeah, that's definitely something you want to do. And Amir says, I'm having trouble synthesizing information, which is important to exclude. Yeah, like I said, I think this relates, Amir, you've posted this a few times here in the chat now. I think this relates to your topic. So I think you could see in Joanne's literature review, she actually had a table with her PICO defining inclusion, exclusion on each element of the PICO. And that is a way to set up inclusion, exclusion criteria. If you're saying you don't know what's important to include and exclude, you probably don't have inclusion, exclusion criteria. If you don't have those criteria, it probably means you might not have a well-defined outcome. You may not have that PICO defined. So I recommend going back through that, like I said, in the first video of the systematic review training series. So let me turn to another submission, and then, guys, I can see a lot of questions, which is awesome. I'm going to try to take as many as we can here, and let me come back here and share. I've got multiple screens open. We have here, okay, here we've got an abstract that was sent to me from Emanuela Lima. And let's take a look at this. Well, let me share my screen so you can see. Oh, I'm trying to interpret what this is. So sometimes, guys, it really helps me to get context from you. Then I can give you better support. So this looks like a kind of abstract proposal, maybe, of a project. So let's apply our gift method again. So this is good. Water management, yes, I think that this is clear. This is nice. Um, you actually might not need both these sentences, but let me just take a look. Let's take a look together and see what the gap is. Okay, the gap isn't clear. So this all makes sense. How the hydraulic transients fit in is not clear. My guess is a hydraulic transient can lead to blockages or flow problems, so water doesn't arrive where it's supposed to arrive, or lack of water pressure in the system, and then some people are just going thirsty because water doesn't get there. So you need to kind of specify, there's this disconnect in your logic. So, well, we got problems with the water supply. We need to upgrade these aging systems. We need to monitor transients. Well, for your naive reader like me, I don't see the connection between this and the hydraulic transient. So just make that connection simple and clear. But I think that's probably what's going on, that this is maybe a sign or symptom that something's not good in our piping infrastructure. Okay, and because you're saying my objective is I want to model transients. Okay, but how's that speaking to the big problem that you set up here? And I'm also lost. Has this been done a lot before? Is this the first time this has ever been done? Obviously, in my mind, if it's the first time this has ever been done, that's a pretty important contribution. But if this has been done to death, then we need to know, well, why is this important in Angola? To give us a sense of the contribution that you're making. And model, what kind of models are you using? So when you model something, I'm thinking you're going to do something engineering here, but now you've gone through and you're saying you're doing surveys and you're qualitatively analyzing it, but then you're going to do some computer models. So I think you need to specify what kind of model you're going to use, and maybe that you're going to get some of these surveys to get parameters to populate the model. It's not really clear. And here you say a risk analysis. Are you doing this risk analysis? So this is good. This is a nice payoff. I like this. So maybe it's not clear. Are you doing this risk analysis? So I need a little bit of the gap up here to specify kind of the novelty of what you're doing. Maybe you want to say here that you're doing this to be able to perform or feed into a risk analysis. And maybe you need to clarify that these are parameters that are going to capture the supply and demand to understand. Maybe I'm making something up now. Certain hydraulic transients are okay, but in the context of very high demand needs, then they become a problem. So I think it almost looks like you're scoping out. Yeah, maybe you are doing a risk analysis of which this is the innovative part, but not knowing enough about it, you need to really articulate why that's innovative and speaking to some gap in the field. And you can see how others, right? You want others who are, again, intelligent but not experts in your field to get that this is important. And if you have achieved that, you've done well. Last thing that jumps out, this is completely, this seems to disconnect. Right, I don't know if people are going to know what this is. Self-organizing map, I've never heard of this. Analytic hierarchy process, never heard of that either. So definitely check that as well. That's a little quirky, but it might be a specialized engineering term. Again, thanks for sharing that with us. I'm going to come back to some of our other questions, and then we'll slowly wrap up. But guys, yeah, any thoughts, comments? Does this seem clear to you? If it's not clear, then I haven't done my job. So I want you to let me know. Colleen, you're saying, asking yourself, Colleen's saying, I'm asking myself the same question. Can you identify gaps in your introduction? It is just Colleen saying this. And yeah, Colleen, you need to identify gaps in your introduction. That's essential part. Dean asks, is the JBI is Joanna Briggs approach best for mixed methods? I think that's what you're saying. Um, I think what you're referring to, they have a quality assessment tool for research if you're evaluating the quality of research. And it's a good tool. There's multiple tools available. If there's mixed methods, I sometimes end up adapting a tool depending on the balance of those, because mixed methods by its nature is a very broad church. It sounds like you're going to have some qualitative methods, you're going to have some quantitative methods, you're going to have some that's doing both together. And you'll know yourself what you're going to have more of in your mix. So there's no necessarily right or wrong tool. There are more commonly used tools than others. I recommend skipping the quality assessment step in general, unless you have specific reasons you have to do it. That's just a specific shortcut, because that tends not to be a deal breaker for your paper, and it can be incredibly time consuming without adding a whole lot of value. But that's another conversation. It's just tactic. Your paper probably won't get rejected for that, and it's an easy thing for reviewers to pick at and add in during a revision stage if needed. So hope that Dean. Okay, great. I'm glad. Sometimes I try my best to understand your questions. I don't always understand them. Bernice is asking, is it okay to paraphrase directly with Quillbot, or do I need to paraphrase first before using Quillbot? Same answer as with ChatGPT. I want you to paraphrase first, then use tools like Quillbot. And also, guys, I have found with my students, Grammarly is really, really helpful. If English is not your first language, it will fix just a lot of grammatical issues that can make you look amateurish when it's just English isn't your first language. So Quillbot can also be good. But yeah, do the paraphrasing yourself. That's also going to ensure that you really understand what you're dropping into your document. Okay, guys, I'm worried I missed some, because we got a lot of comments on the session here. So if I missed something from you, very sorry about that. But do reach out to me in the direct messages. Again, we wait for your submissions. So when we get a good batch of submissions, then it's the indicator for us, hey, it's time to do a live workshop. So email me at davidstuckler@fasttrackgrad.com. I'm going to pop this here into the chat for you. Yeah, drop me an email. I love hearing from you. And join our Facebook group. My assistant Marina will be in touch and also can help connect you to the right trainings for you. So we'll be able to detect. If you tell us what you're struggling with, we'll connect you to a training that's going to help you right now. So Asim, that appears to be our PICO training. Dean, maybe you want some of our training on quality assessment, although I recommend skipping it if you can. Others, Bernice, that might be a training on using AI tools for your literature review. Let us know. Odds are we have a training that is going to be available that's going to give you some help right now, that you don't need to go in circles endlessly. You know, the smart people out there find people who can help them get them to where they want to be faster, rather than stubbornly, doggedly just saying, I'm going to figure it all out on my own. You could do that, but while you're trying to figure it out all on your own, somebody else has gotten somebody to show them how to do it, and they're racing ahead of you. And so there's no need to fall behind. I would do what the smart people do and invest in getting yourself support. And we happen to have a lot of free and valuable support, and there are a lot of mentors out there who can connect you with support. So if you are struggling and you're watching this, I want you to make a plan, and this goes back to the roadmap idea earlier, of where you're going to find those resources that are going to help you when times get hard, because they will get hard. And I've been very fortunate to have a lot of mentors along the way that helped me get to the next level. It's not like I'm some independent genius that could do this. I genuinely believe anybody can really thrive in research if they have the right support and people to show them how to do it, just like I was. So guys, that's what I've seen with the students who have really done well over the years, and I want you all to do well. That's what this community is about. And send me your ideas. We can do mini trainings and go more depth on topics. I always love to hear from you, so don't hesitate. I'm not a crusty professor that doesn't want to talk to you. We're here to help. So hope you have a great rest of the week, everybody, and we will look forward to seeing you in the DMs and at our next live workshop. All right.